We're going to cover a lot of ground in the next 30 minutes, and I hope that some of this is useful. When we think about the short and long-term effects of bullying involvement, whether being a target or being the one that is directing the aggression toward other children, there's a number of cross-sectional studies that have been reviewed, and reporting here a meta-analysis by Cook and colleagues. And what they found overall, that those kids that are the targets, or those youth that are bullied, have lower peer status, lower social competence, negative community factors, meaning neighborhood factors that may compromise their risk, and negative school climate. On the other hand, we also see risk for those kids that are perpetrating the bullying, and they have significant externalizing behavior, issues with social competence and academic challenges. They have a negative attitude toward others, and their families can be characterized by conflict. However, I want to point out, if you look closely at this meta-analysis, you'll see that there's a moderating effect at age. And essentially what that means by peer status, what it means is that adolescents who bully have higher peer status than children who bully others, which supports this notion that during their early adolescence, bullying could be a way to establish social status, and the bullies might actually be popular. And I want to turn back to what Marcy was talking about a little bit, and that is cyberbullying. Next slide. Just to reiterate that, the definitions are changing tremendously, cyberbullying, internet aggression, given that the phone is actually a computer now. But we know that it's a different mode of reaching out and deliberately and repeatedly directing hostile behavior or aggression toward another. Next slide. If we look at some national data, longitudinal data, you'll see that the percentage, when we look at internet victimization and cell phone text messaging victimization for kids 11 years to 18 years old in this nationally representative sample, when we look at the extent to which we have an increase in bullying victimization on the internet or cell phone text messaging. And as you can see, that although in 2010 there's a little bit of an uptake in cell phone text messaging victimization, the rates have remained relatively stable. So again, echoing Marcy's comments that as much as we do want to attend to cyberbullying victimization, we also have to recognize that the face-to-face bullying that kids are reporting tend to be much more prevalent. Next slide. And here, when we do think, is in fact cyberbullying victimization inescapable, you'll see that the percent of youth reporting bullying in person is much higher, echoing the data that were presented earlier, in that in-person bullying is 39%, by phone 10%, text messaging 14%, 17% online, and 10% in some other ways. And when we look at the pie chart to the right, when you look at the number of different modes that one is bullying in, you'll see overwhelming majority, 56%, are not bullied at all, cyberbullied at all. And then as we think about the other modes, increasingly the prevalence goes down. So we do want to put that in perspective. Next slide. Well, where is it happening when kids are the victims of cyberbullying or internet aggression? Overwhelmingly, 83% report that this is happening at home. We should be somewhat concerned about the 15% at school, but if you talk to administrators, they're feeling like they're losing the battle as far as monitoring cell phone uses. So increasingly schools are allowing cell phones in the schools and classrooms, and so that could be the 15% in those schools that are really struggling to monitor that. And again, we see that overwhelming number of kids, when they're experiencing cyberbullying victimization, they're experiencing this in one place, and it appears to be in the home. Next slide. So I didn't present all of that research, but if we were to look deeply into that growing up with media and other study, what would we conclude? Well, we conclude that cyberbullying affects between 15 to 17% of youth each year, and harassment, defined in other ways, affects 38%. But the bottom line is more than 4 in 5 youth who use internet are not cyberbullied, right? So in some ways we need to put it in perspective. And about 1/3 of bullied and harassed youth are very upset. So 2/3 report that sometimes when it happens, and it may be rude behavior, that they may just disengage in the IMing, or somehow it's not distressing enough to kind of bring it to a level of concern. But we are concerned about a minority of 8% of kids that report being bullied in person, online, and via text. So it's going to be very, very important as social media and other types of network sites become kind of the world that kids live in. We have to understand who are those youth that are at risk for getting victimized in various domains. And there is a cause for concern that some of this data that's being presented here, that there is an uptake in internet victimization. I mean, in text messaging victimization, but internet victimization doesn't seem to be increasing. But again, as the phone becomes a computer, I think we're going to have to watch these data very carefully.